What's going on, y'all? Today we are transporting ourselves into the minds of the good folks in the front office of the Houston Rockets. They got the number 3 selection here, also the 17th later in the draft, but we're going to focus on number 3 for today. And, as we get more information as the draft nears, we learn kind of where teams are leaning, maybe some prospects that have impressed that are kind of, climbing the draft boards across the league. Paolo Banchero is someone that's kind of been mocked at 3. I think generally almost everyone has him 3, but I've seen now as people kind of review the footage, some of his tape, especially this past NCAA tournament, that, Paolo seems to be impressing more and more people, and now it seems like he's more in play at 2 for OKC than maybe he originally was. And I think everyone figures, Chet being kind of a project and a gamble, but a really high ceiling, low floor kind of guy, just kind of a match made in heaven with OKC, given how much runway they have and just a reputation for really good development. That all makes sense on paper. Now, obviously, they could go a different direction, and Paolo could fit well there too, because there's tons of playing time for him there. They don't have a long-term answer at, kind of that front court, like stretch 4 position, someone who could play well with Shea and Giddey. So Paolo at 2, totally on the table. I don't think anyone would fault the Thunder for taking him 2. I think you can't fault any of these teams for taking, Jabari, Chet, and Paolo in whatever order it may be. And I think Houston sitting at 3 would be happy to take whoever's left at that moment and let, the other 2 figure it out. Sit at 3. I think chances are it'll probably be between Chet and Paolo. Unless the Magic makes some kind of weird thing there, most likely Chet or Paolo. And, even Chet in Houston makes a lot of sense. They don't have, between Şengün, they drafted him, Usman Garuba, also kind of, they got young big men, but no one yet that's kind of taking that starting role. I think Chet could slide in there pretty quickly and make a lot of sense just for them as a rim protector and a finisher inside. Take a couple threes a game, high octane offense, all that. But if we're going with what we think is most likely, it looks like Paolo will still be there at 3. And in him, the Rockets are going to get someone that can score at all 3 levels, that has playmaking upside, which is something that really separates him even from Jabari and Chet, and from most of this class, is kind of having that guy that can create shots for others. And we see that that's really a skill that's highly touted in the NBA right now. We look at, the recent NBA Finals, and that the Warriors could use another guy who can create shots that's not just an off-ball shooter or just a rebounder, something like that. Someone who can have the ball in their hands and create shots for themselves and others. It looks like Paolo will be able to do that right off the bat at the NBA level. So you add that to your roster, that's a huge addition, especially because the Rockets, and Jalen Green seems to be, took a huge step second half of this past year as kind of a pure scorer. And then you have Kevin Porter Jr. as well, who, does some facilitating, but both guys, not the most efficient backcourt, shall we say, in terms of shooting the ball. And, Paolo, little concerned not about that in terms of he's also not the most efficient, or wasn't in school. So he might kind of exacerbate some of their shooting inefficiencies, at least right off the bat. Obviously, there's low expectations in Houston going into the next year. I think it's going to be a fun team to watch, and I think they're going to put up a lot of points. But Paolo is his profile is going to kind of reinforce their strengths, and also, kind of reinforce their weaknesses, in that hasn't shown, kind of a proclivity for defense right away at Duke. Now, Will being on an NBA roster and, fighting at the highest level in the world, inspire more defense out of him. Who's to say? He obviously has the frame to be a good defender, has the athleticism to be a good defender. A lot of it's just effort and communication. So it's not really rocket science a lot of the time to just be a good defender in the NBA. It's just a matter of effort. And that usually comes with a winning culture, which, Houston at the moment doesn't have a lot of guys that have kind of that winning culture. It's a lot of young dudes. Jayshawn Tate is really the only guy I would consider kind of that gritty, dive on the floor, kind of, absorb contact, embrace contact, kind of defensive-minded guy. So I would be a little concerned that Houston is losing some of that grit. Now, obviously, at 3, there's no one you're going to be able to address that with. If you look at like a Jaden Ivey, you look at maybe like a Keegan Murray, but that would be definitely a stretch. Like, you would be reaching for Keegan Murray, but maybe that's just something you bring in some more veteran presence. A guy like a Patrick Beverly, obviously not realistic for Houston, but down the line you're going to have to somehow inject some sort of defensive prowess to get this team from rebuilding to actually competing in a playoff series. So that would be something, if you're looking long down the road, I'd be a little concerned about. But I think for the time being, Paolo makes a lot of sense. He brings you youth. He brings you playmaking. He's going to put butts in seats if that's something you value. Because him and Jalen Green, I think, will be one of the more exciting young duos in the NBA. And so, you can't go wrong. Houston, Paolo Banchero. Let me know what you think. If you're a Houston fan, if you're just an NBA fan in general, if that's the route you take, or if you go, someone else, you're praying that Chet falls to you, that Jabari falls to you, maybe you trade up, maybe you trade out. But let me know what you think. But that's it for today. Take it easy, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.